thank you for inviting me to this occasion. At the outset, let me appreciate the tremendous contributions of Sri N.J. Yasaswy to various fields in India, particularly management education. Unfortunately, I did not have the personal privilege of meeting him, but I have, of course, heard a lot of things about him earlier. And in fact, today again, I had the pleasure of hearing about several of his accomplishments and contributions to the country. So on this occasion, I think we owe it to leaders like Sri Yasaswy that we all dedicate ourselves to the service of the country, and particularly those of us in the field of management education, we rededicate ourselves to the cause of management education in India. So my salutations to Sri Yasaswy on this occasion. Thanks again for inviting me, and I'm going to speak on a very sort of basic topic on innovation in India, which is the subject I have been focusing on for about close to 3 decades now. Innovation is important for a number of reasons. I think we all understand that. Innovation is required to achieve better usage of resources. And Dr. Sharma described Sri Yasaswy as a person who was focused on creating value. Innovation has exactly the same objective. It has the objective of creating value for people, for country, for society, for companies. Innovation is also very important because it helps us solve a lot of challenging problems, particularly in a resource-scarce environment like India. If we want to solve many of the basic and core problems, whether it be healthcare, education, poverty alleviation, etc., it's quite difficult to imagine doing that without a significant degree of innovation. So innovation is basically important for the progress of all of us. And that's one of the reasons I have been working on this topic now for a long time. So what I will cover in this lecture this afternoon is giving you a perspective on the future of innovation in India. And in order to do this, I will be drawing some examples and some lessons from the major innovations of the last decade. And as you will see shortly, the last decade has been quite eventful as far as innovation is concerned in India. And the innovations in the last decade lay a good platform or a good foundation for us to move forward. The research behind today's talk has been done in collaboration with an old student and friend of mine, Daya Sindhu, who was our PhD student at IIM Bangalore. And today he runs a very interesting organization called Itihasa Research. One of the major contributions of Itihasa Research has been to document the history of the Indian IT industry, which has been a very significant contributor to the growth of the Indian economy. So as I mentioned, what I'm going to do is start by talking about some of the major innovations in the last decade. We have been trying to track innovation in India, and in this process, we have also been trying to identify which are the most impactful innovations. And the 10 innovations I'm going to present to you now were chosen on the basis of the importance of the problem they solve, the novelty of their solution, and the kind of scale of impact they created. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the 10 innovations of the last decade to the 10 best innovations in the previous decade, that is 2001 to 2010. And based on that, I'm going to tell you something about the trajectory of innovation in India and where innovation is likely to have impact going forward. So if you look at the top innovations of the last decade, I think right on top, undoubtedly, and particularly in the context of what we have gone through in the pandemic, has been the vaccine capability we have developed in India. And this is not something which is new. In fact, Rotavac, which is a vaccine which was developed to address the rotavirus, which is a leading cause of diarrhea in India, was developed and commercialized about 5-6 years ago. And many of you might know that the company which commercialized Rotavac, Bharat Biotech, is of course today much better known for its contribution in the form of Covaxin, which was developed in collaboration with the National Institute of Virology. So companies like Bharat Biotech have been at the forefront of creating affordable vaccines to address Indian public health problems. Rotavac, for example, costs about 1/15 of the cost of an imported vaccine. Covaxin is also quite economically effective. And also, of course, it has been very efficacious on the front of addressing the virus, which is perhaps the most important priority before the country today. So the first innovation I would like to recognize and acknowledge in the last decade is the vaccines which have been created by Bharat Biotech in collaboration with the Indian Public Innovation System. The second important innovation, which actually goes back a little bit to the earlier decade in the sense that the development of Aadhaar system started in the previous decade, but the actual use of Aadhaar really took off only in this decade. That's why I'm counting it in 2011 to 20. Aadhaar is clearly the world's largest biometric identity system. We have all seen the benefits of Aadhaar. It's enabled targeting of a lot of government programs. It acts as a single identity. Thanks to its biometric system, it enables you to verify identity through a digital method. And of course, the most impactful thing from the country's perspective has been that Aadhaar has been rolled out to about 1.29 billion individuals. You might all remember that when Aadhaar was first launched, there was a lot of skepticism on whether it will be able to cover the whole country. But today we can set that skepticism at rest. And we see so many different applications in which Aadhaar is used. And the most impactful thing of Aadhaar is the way it has been combined with other innovations to solve a whole set of problems. And I'll be talking about these as I go along. The third most important innovation we've seen in the last decade is the Unified Payment Interface, or UPI. The whole digital economy in India today runs on the backbone of UPI. Whenever we transfer money using a phone, whenever we pay with Google Pay or Paytm or PhonePe or any one of these payment systems, what is quietly working at the background to ensure that the payment goes through is the UPI system. The UPI system is really unique because very few countries have a system like this, which is platform independent and which is able to connect, account holders across systems, across banks, in a seamless manner. And if you look at the number of transactions which UPI has clocked and the transaction value, it's steadily growing. So this is the kind of impact. In fact, the latest figure I saw was for this month, for October, about $100 billion worth of transactions were transacted through UPI. So if you're looking at the whole of digital India, it's really running predominantly on this one very important innovation, which, by the way, came from an interesting company called the National Payments Corporation of India, which was set up by the RBI to essentially pioneer this whole digital economy. The next innovation which I would like to outline is a product innovation. In India, historically, we've had a lot of challenge in building good telecom systems, but we have successfully done that. And of course, a lot of the telecom system rests on imported equipment. But there is a company called Tejas Networks here in Bangalore, which makes optical transmission equipment, which is, again, an important backbone of the evolving 4G and 5G telecom systems. And interestingly, this company has recently been acquired by the Tatas and is going to be taken, hopefully, to even bigger heights, thanks to the kind of investment which has come in from the Tata Group. The next innovation I would like to identify and acknowledge is the government e-marketplace, or GEM. We all use various e-commerce platforms. We use Amazon, we use Flipkart, we use several others. But the government has a huge amount of purchases it makes. And the government normally would not go and buy on Amazon. But it's such a large buyer that it was able to conceive a marketplace for itself. So just like you have Amazon for private consumers, GEM is in a way the Amazon for the government. So today the GEM platform has enabled the government to achieve significant cost savings because of using the same principles as are used in e-commerce. It's an end-to-end secure system. It allows all the documentation that happens in government purchase to be taken care of. It takes care of all the other government purchase procedures and processes. And it has completely streamlined the government purchase process, particularly for smaller items. And this has replaced what used to be called the DGSND, which was a government department, which was not particularly known for being the most efficient organization. This has been replaced by this very effective e-commerce platform. Another innovation which I consider to be extremely interesting is the aspirational districts program started by Niti Aayog a few years ago. One of the big challenges that India faces is that we have a large number of districts, which used to be called backward districts, which have the socio-economic and health indicators comparable to some of the backward districts in sub-Saharan Africa. So how do you help these districts improve? How do you help these districts develop better? So this is what this program tries to do. The first thing is just the renaming. They're not called backward districts. They're called aspirational districts, districts which are trying to improve and become better. There's a focus on the key sectors which are behind development. And there's a use of data and competition to enable these districts to do better by focusing attention on these districts, by regular collection of data, by monitoring of these data, by collaboration between central, state, and district level officers, and healthy competition among the districts. We are seeing very interesting improvements in the performance indicators of these districts. In the context of COVID-19, I mentioned vaccines earlier. Another important innovation has been in the area of test kits. You'll remember not so long ago, maybe about 15 to 18 months ago, when COVID-19 first struck, we didn't even have a good infrastructure in order to test for COVID-19. All the test kits used were being imported at high cost. And then we had companies like MyLab based in Pune, which was the first Indian company to be approved by ICMR with a RT-PCR test kit. Later on, they came out with the first antigen test, rapid antigen test for self-use called CoviSelf. So this is another way. In a way, MyLab is a representative of a set of companies who have been very good in this diagnostic space. And that's another very significant innovation in the country. India has had a very strong pharmaceutical industry for close to 3 decades now. But one of the things that's eluded us is the ability to create new drug molecules. There have been several efforts, and of course, molecules have been created, but rarely have those molecules actually gone all the way to the market, past the different stages and challenges that come along the way. The first new chemical entity to reach the market came from a company called Zydus Cadila, which is again in the news today for its vaccine. It was probably the world's first drug treating diabetic dyslipidemia, combining lipid and glucose lowering effects. This drug, saroglitazar, was launched, I think, in 2013. And remember, in India, this is a very significant requirement because India is also sometimes known as the diabetes capital of the world. And drugs like this will play an important role in controlling the diabetes challenge we face in the country. Of course, you cannot think of innovation in the last decade without talking about Mangalyaan, the Mars mission. The Indian space probe has been orbiting Mars since September 2014. This was India's first interplanetary mission, making us the 4th country to achieve a successful Mars orbit. But it's very well known also for being the lowest cost Mars mission in the world by a huge margin. And there were a lot of innovative scientific and technological steps which were taken in order to reduce the cost of the Mars mission. Not only did this establish us as a space power, or I should say re-establish us as a space power, it also kindled a tremendous amount of interest in science and technology among the young, which is a very important contribution to the country. Another important set of innovations we have seen is from the deep tech healthcare startups. I would particularly like to name 2 companies here, Niramai and Forus. Niramai has focused on detection of breast cancer using a thermal imaging tool, which uses AI in order to make better predictions. Forus is in the area of eye care. It's made a portable device that can screen patients for common eye problems. The common feature between both Niramai and Forus is that they use AI extensively in order to make their whole system more accurate and to enable them to do things at lower cost. And this is the way of the future in a sense, because as we know, many of the new innovations today are using AI in their endeavor to do better innovation going forward. So this is the top 10 innovations in our assessment over the last decade. There were some other innovations which also came close but didn't quite make it. For example, in this picture, you see Train 18 or Vande Bharat as it is called, which was developed by the Integral Coach Factory, which is a much more streamlined and efficient form of train travel between cities. We've had a number of good electric scooters developed in India, including by Ather in Bangalore. Of course, we've had a lot of app-based businesses from Swiggy to Ola to Zomato, which have made life more convenient for all of us. These are some of the other important innovations in the last decade. Okay, so this is basically what we have seen now. Now, how do these compare with the top 10 innovations in the previous decade? Now, in 2011, I was invited by India Today magazine to contribute to a feature they were producing on innovation in India. And the question they asked me was to identify the top 10 innovations in the previous decade, that is 2000 to 2010. So what are the innovations we identified for that decade at that time? Some of them you can see in this picture, which I'm showing you right now. One was the Advanced Light Helicopter, or Dhruv, which was first delivered in the early 2000s by HAL. It was India's first major high-tech defense export. And it is also a very important step in terms of using composite materials and offering contemporary features. Second important innovation was Edge, the slimmest consumer watch in the world, launched in 2002 by Titan. Of course, the Tata Nano was a very significant innovation of that decade, even though, of course, subsequently it's not done commercially. But in terms of showing Indian talent, ingenuity, and engineering skill, I would certainly place the Nano as a very significant innovation. The Bajaj Pulsar, launched by Bajaj Auto in 2001, which exists in some other avatars today, was a very interesting combination of style, power, and fuel economy by using some very innovative technologies like DTSI and exhaust tech. The Reva electric car, whose commercial launch in 2001 was again another big landmark for India. And in a way that formed the harbinger of many new electric technologies that we use today. Another important innovation of the previous decade was the Mahindra Shan, a kind of crossover vehicle for farmers developed by Mahindra and Mahindra. You might remember that 2000 to 2010 was also a decade when we had a lot of power challenges, and inverters became very popular. And Sukam, you remember, a company which had developed a very neat appliance type inverter, which made a big splash at that time. Tejas Networks was part of my list in the last decade as well, for their core Ethernet transmission and optical networking. One of the interesting innovations in the last decade was Fungisome, which became important in the COVID situation. Some of you might know that during COVID, a lot of people had problem with fungal infections. And this Fungisome, which was created by Lifecare Innovations in 2002, became an important treatment for these fungal infections during COVID-19. And another important company, Strand Life Sciences, which was recently invested in by Reliance, came up with arguably the world's most powerful data analysis and visualization platform, which has made significant difference to biologists globally. So these are the 10 innovations we identified in the 2000 to 2010 decade. So how do you compare these innovations across the decades? This will tell us something about how innovation in India is evolving. I think you must have noticed one thing, that one of the first important differences between the previous decade and this one is how we've had so many high impact public innovations in 2011-20. You just look at the aspirational districts program, you look at Aadhaar, you look at UPI, all of these came from the public innovation system and are in the nature of public goods. They're not owned by any private company, and they form very important platforms on which others can create value. So this is a very significant difference we see in the kind of innovation we have seen in this decade compared to the previous one. And of course, digital and data are very important drivers of innovation today. And that's reflected in several of the innovations which I told you about regarding 2011 to 2020. Just to tell you how important this whole idea of public goods-based innovation is, just think of the whole India stack that we use almost every day, which has Aadhaar authentication at the base. Then it has Aadhaar-based eKYC and the digital locker. Then you have the cashless layer, which includes UPI and IMPS and other payment methods that we use every day. And finally, there's the consent layer, which is all about the giving consent to access data. So it's this India stack today. And remember, all of these are in the nature of public good. These are not owned by any company, not controlled by any company, but companies are building applications on top of that. So whether you talk about Google Pay or whether you talk about Paytm, they're all building applications on top of that and using this public infrastructure for a lot of frictionless transactions. A second important difference we see between 2011-20 and the earlier period is that healthcare has become a major arena for innovation. Of course, that's not surprising because COVID, particularly in the last 2 years, has been a preoccupation of all of us. But there are other reasons, and I'll come back to those reasons in a few minutes. One interesting feature in the last decade has been the reduction in big ticket, high visibility corporate innovation. We saw all these big projects. For example, we saw the nano in the previous decade. But somehow we've not seen those kind of very big, impactful private sector innovations in the last decade. What's also not been very visible is some of the big visible innovation by MNCs. Many of you would know that a lot of multinationals have R&D centers in India, but we haven't seen some of those breakthrough innovations from these R&D centers. So an important question which we need to answer at some point is, why has this happened? And another important difference of the last decade has been that startups are emerging as major innovators. So you might notice in the previous decade, we did have startups, but the startup influence and the startup involvement innovation is much more significant in this decade. But one particular issue which still remains a challenge is deep tech innovation. That is the very intensive core R&D based innovation. We've still not seen a very high level of that even in this decade, but things are changing. And I think we will see more of this happening in the future. Which leads us to the next question. What have been the important enablers? What is it that has allowed or caused or facilitated this kind of innovation to happen in the 2011-2020 decade? One, of course, is simply the digital backbone and organizations like the NPCI, which have created the whole digital layered structure, the digital stack that we have seen. What is perhaps not so visible to all of us is the fact that a lot of these technologies have been created by volunteers working with the government silently, quietly behind the scenes to architect these things. We all use Aadhaar, but we don't pause to think too much about all the experts behind the scenes who contributed to the development of Aadhaar. Similarly, when you look at the India stack, there have been a lot of experienced IT and software professionals who have worked, many of them have worked for free with the government in order to create many of these public goods. So this is an important development. Of course, we have had national programs like Startup India. I would also like to here underline the importance of some coordination initiatives which the government has spearheaded during COVID. When COVID hit us, we realized that we don't have many of the products we require to address COVID, though we had the capabilities to create those products. So the government set up a whole set of different consortiums. For example, a National Biomedical Resources Indigenization Consortium to focus on developing reagents, diagnostics, vaccines, etc. A consortium for affordable and rapid diagnostics to help create testing kits and a lot of other things. So it was this whole effort to orchestrate or to coordinate, which really helped a lot of the innovation in the healthcare sector. But particularly in the biotech and healthcare sector, it's not something that happened only just now. We have had organizations like the Department of Biotechnology, which have created a whole ecosystem for innovation over the last decade. BIRAC, which is the Biotech Industry Research and Application Council, was set up way back in 2011. And it has driven product development in the biotech and healthcare industry through a series of schemes. And the amazing thing about BIRAC schemes is that they cover all types of organizations, startups, larger organizations, they support academia, they support everyone and at different stages, at the seed stage, later at the development stage, and later at the commercialization stage. So BIRAC has been one of the most powerful programs to enable biotech innovation. And of course, entities like venture capitalists, private equity And even regulators have played a huge role in facilitating the kind of innovation we have seen. For example, when you think of something like fintech, one of the biggest challenges for fintech is how do you test? Because fintech involves testing products in a live environment. And you don't want any new product to suddenly bring down the whole financial system. So the RBI has actually facilitated the creation of regulatory sandboxes. They have allowed relaxation in certain regulations for limited periods of time to limited set of entities for the purpose of testing. So things like retail payments, cross-border payments, etc. New innovations have been able to get tested thanks to this proactive approach of the regulators. Okay, now let me come to the last part of my talk, which is looking ahead. I told you a little bit about the innovations in the 2011 to 20 decade. I compared it with the innovations in the 2001 to 2010 decade and identified some of the differences. Now let's try to look into the crystal ball. Let's see what's the future of innovation in India. There are some big challenges. The challenges for India are first that we need to solve the right problems. And I'll tell you in a moment what I mean by the right problems. We need to build innovation capabilities in emerging technology areas. We need to create a new generation of innovators, and I'll tell you what characteristics those new generation needs to have. We need to sharpen industry academia collaboration, particularly have more application-driven research in academia and better translation capabilities. We need to enhance R&D in established companies. We need to create a new generation of genuine innovation clusters. We need to focus on making a lot of the new platform applications in the public domain work effectively. And last but not the least, we need to do innovation to meet our commitments on climate change. So let me talk briefly about these before I conclude the lecture. Solving the right problems. I think in India, there is really no shortage of problems. But the challenge is sometimes to just focus on those challenges which will really have the most impact. So one company I particularly like is this company called Taral Tech, which is started by one of our alumni, Anjan Mukherjee. So he's taken up a very simple problem. How do you make sure that the water pumped out from a hand pump is safe to drink? And how do you do this in an eco-friendly and energy-friendly way? So he uses a very innovative technology, where he basically uses what is called a Taral Tech reactor. It doesn't require consumables, it doesn't require electricity, no chemicals, no filters or membranes, no maintenance or supervision, and just a one-time fitting. And using what is called cavitation technology, it enables 99% pure water. So this is the kind of problem and solution which will make a real difference to the consumption of water in India. And we all know that waterborne diseases are a significant health issue. If this can be addressed, this will be a really huge benefit to the country. Second important thing is when we come to emerging technologies. Today, when the world thinks about semiconductors, it thinks about Taiwan. Taiwan is a small country, just 24 million people. That might be the size of Delhi NCR or something like that. And with that kind of a population, they are today the world's leaders in semiconductors. India has unfortunately had some challenges in getting onto the new technology bus. We sort of missed it in semiconductors. We didn't quite catch it in nano. We've done a little better in biotech, but in future, this is our challenge. Can we emulate what Taiwan did in semiconductors in some of the emerging areas? The good news is the government has launched technology missions in many of these emerging areas, but that itself may not be sufficient. We need to do much more to be effective in all these emerging technology areas. We need to create a new generation of innovators, and there have been a lot of innovative programs to do this. We need to find a way of scaling up these programs. One program I can mention is the Stanford India Biodesign Program, which was started in 2007 as an alliance between the design school at Stanford, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and IIT Delhi. The idea is very simple. Its aim is to train medical device innovators with a focus on Indian health needs. So essentially, these group of very talented individuals, they do a design course at Stanford, and they come back to India and spend time in the Indian healthcare system, identifying needs they need to address. So that whole point I made earlier about addressing the right problem, that's taken care of by exposing them to Indian problems at a primary health center, district hospital, and a tertiary hospital like AIIMS. And this biodesign program has turned out a lot of very talented innovators and a lot of good products as well. And we need to find ways to enhance and scale up these kind of ideas. We also need to get some inspiration from professors around the world who have chosen projects which, in a way, straddle both high tech as well as high research impact. This gentleman, Professor Bob Langer at MIT, I urge students particularly to go and read up on him. He's a person who has been at the back of 200 startups. He personally, I think, has technologies which have gone into more than 300 patents, something like that. And when he conceives a new project, he looks for these 4 criteria. The project should have the potential to be based on a huge idea, which is linked to a critical social need. It should be able to give rise to a seminal paper based on the research to establish the science underneath it. It should enable a blocking patent derived from patent disclosures that can be filed before the paper is sent for publication. And finally, of course, it has to be efficacious. So you should be able to demonstrate in vivo studies that the innovation actually works. So these are the kind of criteria he has in his mind when he's taking on a new research project. And this is the kind of approach we need in our research institutions. We also need to connect ourselves with industry better in academia. One of the important steps in this direction has been the IIT Madras Research Park, which was started by Professor Anand and Professor Junjunwala, who you see in this picture. It's, of course, adjoining IIT Madras, but much more important thing is you can't be in that research park unless you are contributing to the IIT Madras ecosystem. And along with that contribution, IIT Madras has also evolved a very progressive startup policy, which encourages its faculty and students to get involved in startups and to interact with companies in the research park. So this is a great method for bringing industry and academia closer together and making the kind of collaborations work well. What's also impressive again at IIT Madras is the Gopalakrishnan Deshpande Center, which is looking at a very interesting problem of how do you help a lot of these ideas which come from professors and startups, how do you take them to fruition? And they identified the incubation phase as a very important phase in this whole evolution. And they are focusing on how can they improve this incubation phase. I mentioned earlier that our large and medium-sized companies really need to improve their R&D capabilities. And we have several good role models. One of my favorite companies is a company called Praj Industries in Pune. It was started by this gentleman, Pramod Chowdhury, whom you see in the picture. He started by importing a technology to enable the process fermentation of cane molasses. This is basically converting sugarcane molasses into alcohol. But the process he imported didn't work very well. The reason it didn't work very well was our molasses was very dirty. It wasn't collected in very clean conditions and the process didn't work well. So finally, he had to figure out how to make the process work. In that whole endeavor, he started understanding more details of molasses and waste, literally fingerprinting or understanding the characteristics of molasses and waste. He started becoming a specialist in building process equipment. Today, they've gone into the molecular level. Today, in their R&D center in Pune, they are looking at how can they create second generation biofuels. And this is a company to watch going forward because they're straddling the whole end-to-end chain, right from the basic research all the way to application. We also need to create a whole different set of innovation clusters. Our SEZs in India are primarily real estate plays. They don't actually bring companies with complementary skills together. So Anandi Iyer, who heads the Fraunhofer institutions in India, she's come up with this concept of building what she calls ASTRAs, Applied Science and Technology Research Alliances. So these are thematic innovation clusters jointly funded by government and industry, with a technology expert as the cluster manager. You try to build technology in these clusters which is ahead of industry, so that industry also finds an incentive to collaborate with the cluster. And this is the way of driving capabilities in new and emerging technologies. We also have some new technology stacks on the anvil. For example, there's the National Health Stack, which will enable us to use all the existing identity technologies like Aadhaar and build a whole health stack on top of that, including health record management, ability to reach out to different doctors. This can be a big driver for better utilization of our health resources. Or the account aggregator, which has already been launched, which basically enables you to aggregate information from all your different financial service providers and make that information available to a third party to help you in personal finance management, wealth management, or even to give you a loan. So these are concepts which have already started coming into play. These are very unique, by the way. Very few countries have this. I would like to repeat this again. So we have the opportunity to use our digital platforms to create all of this. Finally, it's very evident from whatever we've been seeing in Glasgow in the last week or so, that combating climate change is going to be a very important challenge for our innovation ecosystem. India is currently the world's 4th biggest emitter of carbon dioxide. Of course, in aggregate terms, not in per capita terms, but we will have to bring down our carbon dioxide emissions. And as many of you would know, in the COP26 summit, which just happened, India has made some very important commitments. We have set a net zero goal for 2070, but we also have some nearer term goals. We have said that we will raise our renewables to 500 gigawatts, and we will fulfill 50% of our energy requirements by clean energy by 2030. That's quite a tall order, by the way. Today, about 70% of our energy comes from coal. So to come down to 50% will be quite a big challenge. We've also committed to cutting 1 billion tons of carbon emissions from the projected emissions by 2030 and to reduce carbon intensity by 45% in the economy. All of these will require significant innovation on the part of Indian industry, the government, and all of us in society to make it happen. So let me just conclude by saying that I think there are several strengths we have as we go forward. We have demonstrated a unique ability to do innovation in a public way, but not necessarily by the government. We have created innovation platforms that are in the nature of public goods, on the back of which other innovators and companies can create important applications. We have important strengths in healthcare and biotech, which will continue to be important given the kind of health challenges we foresee in the future. But there are a number of emerging areas in which we also need to build capabilities. I outlined some of them. And the challenge for India going forward is going to be, can we really build on what we have done so far and enable Indian innovation to address many of the new challenges that are before us today. So once again, let me thank you all for inviting me to deliver this Yasaswy lecture. As I mentioned at the outset, Mr. Yasaswy was an outstanding innovator in his own way. And I think it's only fitting that we pay a tribute to him today by looking at how the rest of us can also contribute to innovation in the country. So thank you very much, and greetings to all of you.